Thanks for your time, and I would like you to introduce yourself.
Daniel Stephen William Fletcher, originally from the north of England, Great Britain. Formerly a humanitarian volunteer here, and now serving in the ZSEU, in the International Legion 2nd Battalion Alpha Company. And remarkably nervous about a simple interview. Who would have thought?
How long have you been here?
I came here in late 2022.
Late 2022. So you've been here more than 2 years.
2.25 years now.
2.25. And you've been wounded. You've been awarded by a medal. What's the name of this medal?
The full title, it's called the Honor and Glory Cross, and I was told it was nicknamed the Slava Volci Cross. In full, it would be the ZSEU Dobre Volci Krestom Chest I Slava. So the Military Volunteer Cross, Honor and Glory, nicknamed Slava Volci, which is, according to my commander, the local nickname, and which is a pity because in Ukrainian, Chest I Slava Crest is a natural rhyme, but I suppose the nickname that they've bestowed on it is wordplay as well. Volksy, this is a wolf, in Russian, or Voltsy. So Slava Voltsy could be registered as glory to the wolf too, or glorious wolf.
Glorious wolf. What you've been awarded it for? What was the reason for that?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I feel entirely deserving of it. And I've just been summoned by my company commander to receive the Ukrainian Purple Heart from the Minister of Defense.
So you've been awarded by a second medal?
Yeah, it's called the official title. I can't remember the full name of it, but it's abbreviated Medal for Wounds, and it's a Ministry of Defense award.
And you've been badly wounded?
Krovoi Zlianya in
bleeding
Kharkovsky.
Bleeding, brain injury.
Brain hemorrhages. They found, I fought for 2 months undiagnosed, and they, when I was taken off rotation because of my obvious impediments, my loss of vision, the narrowness of my visual field, my platoon commander took me off rotation, and I tried to leave with the intention of being treated in England and returning to the fray. Excuse me. And instead, I was diagnosed in the Kharkiv military hospital, or sent to a clinic for an MRT, and they discovered bleeding around the left parietal lobe, as well as diffuse axonal damage and damage to the cerebral cortex.
Under which circumstances have you been wounded, if you can share?
A 120mm mortar. I was building a forward position. We were already in Serebryansky Lis Chudes, the Forest of Wonders, as the Ukrainians nickname it. Our defense line in the easternmost sector of the easternmost region of the country, in Luhansk region. We were southwest of Kreminna, and we were 68 meters away from the Russian lines, as calculated from our drone reconnaissance. The distance was 68 meters, and then we built new forward positions, myself, my team leader, and our Georgian sniper, Dato. And I think we built another 30 meters forward. So we were roughly 35 to 40 meters away from the enemy lines in the new forward position and the open trench that led there.
So you were meters away from Russians. If they capture you, they will not take mercy on you.
No,
you understand that?
There were men captured in our sector.
And what happened to them? Do we know?
Some of them died, but that particular infiltration was repulsed by a QRF, a Quick Reaction Force, and 2 Georgians were captured in, I think, November 2023. a few weeks before I got there, there were some Georgians captured because we saw on a Z blog on a Russian propaganda channel on Telegram, they were mocking me and my Georgian friend, and they knew us by name, and they were prescribing all kinds of gentle and delicate treatment that they anticipated, all manner of torments they wanted to inflict on us, and that was one of their points of boasting, that they'd horribly mistreated some of our Georgian brothers. They tried to infiltrate quite often because of the absurd distance. I suppose the rationale was Stalingrad tactics. You get as close as you can to the enemy, and then they can't hit you with the big guns. But, well, they draw parallels between the orcs of Mordor and the Russian army for a reason, mainly brutality and stupidity. It's a very pregnant term, calling them orcs. We still got hit with everything from magnesium thermite to constant shelling, artillery and mortar barrages, grads. We were hit with grad, multiple launch rocket systems, magnesium thermite, which is evil stuff and burns through practically anything. They use white phosphorus too, but I never personally saw that or experienced it. But magnesium thermite, much the same. Evil science. And yeah, the Russians will, even if we're 35 to 68 meters away from their own forward positions, the Russians will happily, quite gladly bomb their own men just to get us.
And you witnessed that yourself?
Yeah.
So it's not a hearsay, this is not a second war, second hand. You witnessed yourself a Russian bomb themselves just to get to you?
Yeah, they certainly bombed their own positions just because of the obscene closeness, the obscene proximity of their positions to ours. And sadly, it made it all the more enticing for them to try and infiltrate during the night, nocturnal infiltrations, and, you know, duck walking across 35, 40 meters of no man's minefield towards us. And some of their Spetsnaz units have thermal resistant ponchos. So you'll see part of a face or a head and a pair of boots duck walking towards you. It's quite sinister.
Are you a military man? Were you a military man, should I ask?
Before you quit, no, I was a humanitarian volunteer. I was a disaster relief worker in Indonesia.
You were a disaster relief worker.
Yeah.
You never been to UK military service or any other army services?
No, I was never that way inclined.
What was your education training before the war?
Or before the war, nothing. Yeah. I had experience of helping clean up and deliver supplies and assist in the rebuilding efforts after natural disasters, earthquakes, landslides, mudslides, all the good stuff in Indonesia, volcanoes. So I knew what death and disaster smelled like, but war is obviously in retrospect, I was unprepared for the brutality and savagery of war, because this is man-made disaster. It's malevolence. It's man-made malice. It's different to natural phenomenon.
So what compelled you? What made you to volunteer and enlist to the Ukrainian Army?
When I came here, it seemed like the right thing to do. I knew people that had already volunteered for varying lengths of time. And I wanted to throughout 2022, but it was later in the year when I arrived here because I was stuck in Thailand through the pandemic with very little money on a small claustrophobic island. And I was grateful for it, I'm not complaining, but equally, February the 24th, 2022, the world changed. And I suppose after the end of the Cold War, it was almost, regarding major powers, if you want to call it that, and conflicting worldviews, it was almost as if they pressed pause on history. And democracy and pluralism and internationalism had a chance to reign supreme over these stupid squabbles that we've been engaging in since we were bellowing around the swamps and hills and fields tens of thousands of years ago. And then the tide rolled back, and all of a sudden we're experiencing territorial land grabs and violent invasions, and once more an emergent military superpower that's hostile to the so-called West and the democratic states and all the values that we take for granted. And yeah, I knew I had to be involved. It'd be irresponsible to not be involved. But the man who there's 3 battalions of the International Legion in the regular army, not counting Gur. And I came into contact with the man who was recruiting for the 1st and the 3rd battalions, and he's done a lot of very good work evacuating civilians from disaster and war zones. He's a very principled American man, and he and I developed a very strong, warm relationship, and he cares about me. And even then he said, look, you're a humanitarian, you don't need to get involved in this slaughterhouse, this abattoir. Yeah, you can get some training here, but you're going to be unprepared for the savagery and the chaos and carnage. Just stick to your strengths, do some humanitarian work. So he gave me some connections in Kharkiv, and I did this and that, and it took me about 5 or 6 months to get properly, to actually find a sort of permanent home in Kharkiv at World Central Kitchen, Frunze factory, and then I started getting to know more people and started volunteering for this delivery, and can we do this, can we do that? I befriended the 2 Sashas who were working at the Kharkiv Red Cross. And yeah, the Red Cross gets a very bad rep, rightly or wrongly. But at the ground level, whatever corruption and negligence and even indifference or malice may exist at the higher levels, at the ground level there are some very decent and principled people who are putting in good work. And yeah, I was lucky to volunteer and put in some work with some of them.
So what locations to the front line have you been? So you've been to Kharkiv Oblast. Where? Where are the Kharkiv Oblast?
You mean as a
locations
as a Legionnaire or
as a Legionnaire? Yes.
I'm not going to just regarding OPSEC.
All right.
I suppose it's.
We're gonna kill it. We're gonna kill it.
I can.
No, you don't have to answer. No.
Well, I can happily say that it's known, and I'm not revealing anything because this sector and these positions do not exist anymore.
Let's keep that part.
I can reveal that our.
Let's keep that part not important.
Yeah.
Luhansk
region.
Luhansk region. Okay.
Kremina, Liman Kremina front.
Let's let them broadcast it. Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Everything else is best unsaid. But
all right, but let's left best unsaid. That's fine. Fear. Have you experienced fear, especially the first?
Certainly.
Can you describe it? How the fear feels like? It's a biological. Is it your head? Is it in your stomach? Describe the fear.
Well, it comes in different degrees. But I knew the first time when I was in the first year when I was I almost said just a humanitarian volunteer. There's no just about it, because when you're volunteering for free and you're not getting any financial recompense, and for example, I mentioned the 2 Sashas from the Kharkiv Red Cross, or when you're working with other people independently and saying, hey, let's go to Konstantinivka and Chasiv Yar on the western outskirts of Bakhmut, or let's go and help with the mandatory evacuations over at Kupiansk in the east of Kharkiv Oblast. Using the 2 Sashas as an example, the Red Cross wasn't giving them anything. If we were organising to go to Chasiv Yar and take medical supplies to Konstantinivka and the hospital, we would be contacting like Frunze, the World Central Kitchen affiliate, and the factory that was attached to it, and we'd be saying, hey, so X, Y, and Z sent these supplies here. We're in the factory. They've got a need for it in Konstantinivka. Can we da-da-da-da-da? And then trying to get food from people. And it wasn't the Red Cross. It was just like using the Red Cross credentials, the magic open sesame card. So there's no just a humanitarian volunteer, because some of these people spend their own money to...
Try to describe to me your physical or psychological perception of fear. How does it come? Because people who've never been to front line, they just don't understand what it is. Can you describe it to me?
It was very exhilarating the first time I went to the front as a Legionnaire, as a soldier in uniform, as a member of the armed forces, with a gun on my lap and grenades in the pouch and vest and helmet, and, you know, we're in a truck being driven over the border from the northern part of Donetsk region, from the Liman area, over the border, and then into Luhansk region. You're in the easternmost part of the Donbass, the easternmost region in Ukraine. At the time, it was 97% Russian occupied. I think it's 99% plus occupied now. We've lost a lot of ground there, sadly. From everywhere along the Kupiansk, Svatova, Kremina line, all the way down to Bilohorivka. A lot of ground has been lost.
But let's go back to my question. Describe me the fear if you can. How does it feel?
Well, it comes in different degrees. So I realized that maybe I was slightly abnormal when the first time that missiles exploded very close to me, and it wasn't delivering food or supplies around frontline areas or villages like Tia Novaya on the Russian border, or, you know, Volchansk, sorry.
That's fine.
I'll try and, it's Kharkovsky, Donbassky. It wasn't shelling that first got me, it was missiles exploding very close to me. And the first time something really came in touching distance where I actually felt a little bit of it, and it was the first S-300 raid, when I guess all the Iskander missiles had been getting shot down by the air defence, and then the Russians reconfigured the S-300s and started hitting Kharkiv city from Belgorod. And I was, responsible mammal that I am, I was walking home drunkenly, a little bit too late, in the middle of the night actually. It would have been the 5th of June, 2023, so I'm 7 months in, early summer 2023. And these S-300s explode near Svobody Square. And one of them was on the same street as me, and I barely blinked. I didn't even flinch. And the police were very good, actually. A police car drove past, picked me up, and the owners of Frunze, the World Central Kitchen affiliate, they'd actually, friends of theirs had warned the police that there's a drunken English volunteer wandering around, and he's volunteering for free, he means well, he's not a bad person or a suspicious element, but he missed his train home and he couldn't get a taxi, so he's somewhere around Svobody Universitet area. And they picked me up. I thought I was in trouble. I tried showing them my Mr. Bean, Ukrainian driving license for Mr. Bean. And to my surprise, they just drove me to my friend's house, and the police were really nice and respectful. But I realized then that I was built for it, if you want to call it that, because it was an S-300 missile exploding on the same street, and I knew that there weren't any civilian casualties because of where it landed, and I was just more curious and interested rather than afraid. But obviously the stakes are upped when you join the armed forces, and it's very different when you go to zero line. I was full of nervous anticipation, waiting for the truck, strapping the armour on, filling your pouches, filling up your magazines with bullets, filling your pouches, getting all your gear and equipment in order, and then waiting for the truck, getting into the truck, that silent ride over the border from Donetsk into Lugansk. You know that it's 97, 98% Russian occupied. There's already, explosions, the noise is getting louder as you get there. I probably shouldn't reveal too much about how we go into position, but the whole way there until, you have to trek in on foot for the last kilometre or 2 or 3. It depends on the unit, the team, the mission, the sector. But at the very least, I think you're going to have to trek in a kilometre or so on
And
foot.
that's the scariest.
Yeah, because when it's unknown, when it's an unknown, you're hurtling headlong into the unknown. And there's enemy drones overhead. And you know that even if they're not dropper drones, there's no grenades coming at you, or if they're not kamikaze drones, they've still surveilled you. So as sure as night follows day, you've got the artillery and mortars, the indirect fire coming in, because the drones have spotted you, and you have to spread out so that one shell cannot take out an entire team, and then you're very mindful of the fact that the Russians have turned eastern Ukraine into the world's largest minefield, and that's scary, knowing that you can step on a mine at any given moment. And in this particular sector where I first went out, Liman, Kremina front, Serebryansky forest, the forest of wonders, as Ukrainian soldiers call it, Lis Chudes, Serebryansky Lis, southwest of Kremina. Yeah, it doesn't get much play internationally, but it's consistently been in the top 2 heaviest sectors on a daily basis. If you check Ukrainsky Pravda, which I have done for the last 3 years, and you get the daily operational frontline reports, and it tells you how many attacks, how many assaults, how many enemy assaults have taken place on a given day. And yeah, at times, like the start of last year, Avdiivka was the hottest, Avdiivka, Pokrovsk going through the summer, and at times Kurakove recently, and Toretsk, and the last few weeks, Velika Novosilka, they've been the hottest front. But going back to the later stages of the Kharkiv counteroffensive in 2022, the Liman, or Liman, Luhansk, Liman, Kremina, Svatova, Kremina line, Luhansk region, whatever you want to call it, the Luhansk Oblast campaign has been consistently in the top 2 heaviest sectors of the day, more than any other front by far. And yeah, it's scary knowing that there's mines all over the place. And here's the thing, with the Vietnam War, there are still victims of the Vietnam War who haven't been born yet because of all the chemical toxicity from all the Monsanto stuff that was dropped, the deforestation chemicals, Agent Orange, and the whole rainbow of evil colours. There are still children being born with horrific deformities. There's still children stepping on landmines. So even decades after the end of the Vietnam War, there's still victims of the war that are unborn. And that's going to be the case with Ukraine for a long time. That's the tragedy of it. The fact that many years and decades from now, there are still unborn victims of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, the Russo-Ukrainian war. Not every victim of this war has been born yet. And that's terrifying. The world's largest minefield. There's going to be children stepping on those mines for decades.
What went through your mind when you got hit, when you got wounded? Do you remember your first thought, if you don't mind sharing?
It was strange, because that was a strange day. We had the previous 3 days in my particular position. I told you that we built a forward position, but even from the position that I can't really call it a back position when it's still 68 meters from the nearest from the enemy lines. But in both parts of that position, if we call it one, we were getting a lot of action in that sector. We were getting hit with RPGs a lot. We were getting sprayed with a PKM, a machine gun. There were lots of drones. That was, yeah, the drone advantage was becoming markedly worse. The drone deficit, the drone disadvantage that we were experiencing. I think on that mission our Baba Yaga got shot down and we didn't have a replacement Baba Yaga. And something sickening like a, 20, 30, 40 to 1 drone and indirect fire disadvantage, artillery and mortars.
So, but let's go back to the question. What went through your mind?
So I was just setting the scene for it. So we've had a lot of action over the previous 3 days. And then on this particular day, we have a fight where they're attacking us. And then myself, my team leader at the time, and my Georgian brother, a guy called Dato, who's a sniper, we go down to repair and, the forward position hasn't even been built yet. We've not even, we've dragged a few logs down there, but there's no overhead cover. It's all just open trench. We're digging very perilously close to the Russian lines.
By hand, by shovel? You mean?
By shovel, yeah.
So you shovel it out, okay.
So we're down there. My brother is standing watch for us while me and my team leader are digging. They must have spent a fortune trying to kill us that day. Between PKM fire, the machine gun, between just regular Kalashnikov fire, trying to hit us with RPGs every now and again, the drones. And then it must have been about 20 past 4, going on for 4:30. So there's only 10 or 15 minutes of daylight left in the day. And this is kind of what's strange about the whole situation. We only had to survive for another 15 minutes or so, and then darkness descends, and we were due to be extracted late the next morning. So that would have been it. We'd have left the forest about 18, 19, 20 hours later, and presumably much healthier. We only had to get through another 10 minutes or so. So we're digging, and I'm facing west. So the Russians are to my right. So obviously I'm prioritizing the embankment of this trench that we're digging leading to where we built the new position. I'm prioritizing building that up to 7.5 feet, so that even the tallest among us can walk down the open trench to the new position without having to worry about marksmen picking them off. And it's for our protection too while we're building it. So dig, earth to the right, earth to the right, dig, earth to the right. I built it up 7.5 feet high. The embankment on my left was piddling, it was not quite head high. 5.5 feet maybe. And with 10 minutes to go, there was a little bit of a lull. There's no one trying to pick us off anymore. There's no kamikaze drones. There was a regular Mavic or surveillance drone that went overhead and didn't drop anything, just surveilling. And, the saying, keep your powder dry, from Oliver Cromwell. Maybe our powder should have been a bit drier, but you get so used to the sky being full of drones that when one isn't dropping grenades on you or dive bombing you, you just kind of, it becomes part and parcel of a normal working day. But they surveilled us, and then obviously the artillery and mortar team have got a precise lock on where we are, and just one 120mm shell comes up. And they say that you don't hear the one that hits you, and it's a lie. It's a complete fabrication, because we heard it. It was a whoo, but as it came to us, it was a direct strike almost on me. My friend Dato was maybe 15 to 20, maybe 15 meters down the trench that way, and my team leader was a quick zigzag away, just out of sight, but again 15 to 20 meters away. And so essentially it's landed right on me, and it goes over our heads, and never mind you don't hear the one that hits you. The whistle became a scream. Boom. Next thing I know, I'm sat up with my feet poking back towards our lines, with my back against the trench with the Russians to my back. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not entirely sure I was thinking at the time, but I remember touching my face and I could feel the right side of my face, but then all the left side of my face and head was numb. And I put my hand to my ear, it came away with blood, and I'm, stupefied, blinking stupidly, and I don't think I spoke. I just remember being nonplussed and my hand coming away bloody, and then I've put my finger in my ear and I've got a red finger. The entire left side of my face and head was numb. And I remember looking, and I had to twist my body because I wasn't seeing out of the left side of my head anymore. Monocular now. So I had to twist my whole body and look out my right eye, which was, blurry, but still a functional eyeball. And my friend Dato was maybe 15 meters away, maybe 20, maybe something like that. And he was sat up and he was kind of looking at me wild-eyed. He goes like that. And almost in slow motion, like I'm stuck in quick mud or something, trying to run through a quagmire. I remember kind of just, blinking and trying to clear my head and probably pulling all kinds of stupid expressions. I should have known better before trying to reenact it just now. I probably look quite silly now. But, everything slowed down. I've got a ringing in my ears. Couldn't really hear out of this side. Got ringing in this ear. Blood in the ear. I've got blood on my hand. And in slow-mo, I kind of got my wherewithal. And I'm looking at Dato and he's saying, Fletch, dobre. And then I realised, he's got both his thumbs, his arms are outstretched. He doesn't look, I couldn't see any blood on him. Didn't seem to have been hit with shrapnel. And then I should have probably checked myself for shrapnel, but I don't know. It could have been 3 minutes. It could have been 12 seconds. I don't know. But at some point, Dato has put his thumbs down and he said, Moise. And he's the call sign of my team leader. So I'm completely stupefied. I've looked and I can't see anything, and I'm suddenly like electrified by this jolt of horror. And then I realised that the open trench moved away, and he was digging just round the corner where we actually built the new position, although it wasn't yet built. It was just the trench ended in a sort of dead end that we had to constantly watch. I couldn't see him, and I stupidly turned back to Dato, and I'm, like just imploring him, like, what? Mira, cut that part, please. Moise. Call sign Moise. And I turn again, and time stood still. Time slowed and spread. And again, I couldn't take my sense of time perception was just not even compromised. It was just non-existent. I've no idea how long this whole process lasted. If I had to guess, I would say 30 seconds. But I'm watching, and eventually Moise, his head comes into view around the side of a trench, and he's wild-eyed as well. And he's probably, the further away than the length of this room, he could be 15 metres away. So the shell has obviously landed right on me. I'm right in the kill range. All the shrapnel has missed because of the piddling little embankment of mud. But the shockwave has gone through the mud, and I've just taken the blast wave, the shockwave at point blank radius, but all the shrapnel has missed me. And
No, you're born again, man. You're born again.
Yeah, some second bite of the cherry, right? second bite of the apple. Moise's, I keep almost saying his real name, Moise's face comes into view, and he's wild-eyed, and you know, obviously all three of us looking back are dizzy, delirious, and you know, he looks at me, I look at him, we're kind of frozen in this, like a parody of shock, where we're just looking at each other like, and then he gathered his wherewithal before I did, obviously, because I think he was expecting me to be blown to bits, because he was just round the corner from me, and for it to injure Dato on the other side, obviously, it's landed right on me. So he gathers his wherewithal. He said, go, blindage, as in go back to the bunker behind the old position, because our boys were on stag. They were watching. They were, you know, on duty while we were digging. So yeah, he stumbled towards me. Dato came and grabbed him, and it's almost like I wasn't in control of myself. It was now if I had the opportunity to go back into that moment, then I would have preferably put my arm around Moise on the other side, and you know, and we'd have all gone in together. But it was like I was electrified, having been stupefied for about a minute, or however long this three-way engagement between the three of us was. And lucky that no more shells landed in that time, because yeah, we were all sitting ducks for however long it was. But it's like I was suddenly electrified by adrenaline, and when Dato grabbed Moise and started helping him along, I've still not reacted, and Dato's had to go past me to get him, and they've met in the middle because Moise was stumbling towards me, and I've kind of leapt to my feet and taken off and done the zigzag down the open trench and gone back to the covered positions. And our company commander is there, Sigan. I can name him because the New York Times named him. You're smiling because you know perfectly well his name means gypsy. Yeah, which is ironic given his former profession. He's quite far from a gypsy, but a really good man. He's the one who summoned me yesterday after our sister-in-arms, Masha, Maria Zaitseva. Her funeral is in a few days in Kyiv, and then he summoned me to back to base to receive this Ukrainian Purple Heart, or medal for wounds.
So what about your mom? She would have been worried sick about you, wouldn't she?
Oh, the whole time, yeah. The whole time.
How she's handling it?
Better now that I'm not in active frontline service anymore. Because after that point, we didn't really realise that I knew that my field of vision was severely limited, and I was hallucinating shapes everywhere. So, we get back to position, the other two dragging each other in, and we get there, and our company commander started checking them for wounds, and then one of our guys who's actually from Luhansk, and he gave me the Luhansk patch on my pixel coat that I came in here wearing. He suddenly pointed at it. He's like, "Oh, Krov," and you know, they noticed that I had blood on my ear, and then it was conveyed to them. For the other two were concussed, but then they conveyed, it landed right on Fletch, and they noticed my ear, and then the commander sits me down, and he's running his hands up my leg and taking my body armor off, and he's checking me for, putting his hand up my sleeve.
Looking for shrapnel wounds.
Yeah. And everyone was amazed. The other two were amazed that there was no shrapnel in me. It was just a bleeding ear. And even I don't know.
So you basically get mortar shell landed on you.
Practically.
Practically.
Just on the other side of the embankment. If it landed next to me in the open trench, I was dead. There's no two ways about it. But luckily, it landed basically at my head level just on the other side of this tiny embankment. As I'm building up the embankment on the other side to 7.5 feet high, I would be healthier if I'd done it in reverse. But then I would have been at risk of Russian marksmen.
So let's change the discussion. Russian propaganda call you guys the legionaries, they're mercenaries, implying that you're here for money. If I may ask you how much you get paid?
When I was there, it worked out at 2,000 in the 2nd Battalion. It worked out at, well, we were paid per mission, but if you do 4 missions per month lasting slightly more than half a week, but 4 days or so. I don't know how it is now, but it came to $2,600.
$2,000 a month.
2,600.
Less than $3,000 a month.
Yeah, I think it went up after I was taken off rotation 2 months after I was wounded.
Pitiful sum. That's not what can motivate any Westerns.
Oh yeah,
to risk their lives for $3,000 a month.
No, you could go back to England and work in a Tesco or a big supermarket chain and get more money than that. Just working, menial jobs, minimum wage, you get higher in Britain, and I imagine in America too, and Australia, France, Spain, any country that has had a large number of, relatively large. There's actually a very small number of Legionnaires who've come here. Certainly not as many as advertised.
So, you've met many brothers in arms, legionaries. What is if I can sum it, which I'm not sure I can, what's the overall motivating factor? Why you guys here? Definitely not for money.
It depends person for person. So it's certainly different to how the militias of the Spanish Civil War would have been, whether they were anarchist or Trotskyist or just Catalan independence, freedom fighters trying to break away from fascism, the Catholic Church, and Spanish big business and landowners and whatnot, or the international brigades, which sadly were an instrument of the Spanish Communist Party, so Stalin, and the communists obviously cannibalized. Well, you can read George Orwell for instruction on the Spanish Civil War, but at least most of the fighters in the international units, shall I say, including the militias, not just the international brigades, which were, as I say, tragically a Stalinist instrument, but all of them, the anarchists and the Trotskyists and any number of socialists and Catalan and Basque independentists, or however defined. I think almost all of them would have been motivated by ideology. I think the Legion, the International Legion, is probably more of a mixed bag, because some people like me believe in it, and we fight for ideological reasons because of the historical suppression and subjugation of the Ukrainian people and the crimes that Russia has committed. So even, just going back 100 years, for crushing of the Western Ukrainian Republic and the anarchist republic, and collectivization and the Holodomor and the purges, the Gulag Archipelago, that Solzhenitsyn and Shalamov wrote about so powerfully, of the Soviet oppression of the Ukrainians. And something similar happened with the Spanish and the Catalans. After the fascists and Catholics and big business, the corporatists, won the Spanish Civil War, they put up signs all over Catalonia saying, "You're in Spain, speak Spanish. Habla castellano. Esta es España. Hablar español." It's the same here. For 100 years or so, there's been this, as a Kharkiv right? They would essentially teach you, hey, let the local yokels speak the local tongue, in this case Ukrainian. let the local yokels speak this sort of mongoloid peasant tongue. If you want to be a sophisticated person, if you want to deal in business and be a metropolitan person, and if you want to achieve a degree of comfort and success in your life, then you have to speak Russian. And that's insidious. And there's a reason that so much of the country speaks Syrshic rather than Ukrainian. And there's a reason, obviously, that the eastern regions speak Kharkovsky or Donbassky.
Give me a second. I need to cancel my next appointment. We'll continue. Okay, just give me one quick second.
Certainly. Is it still recording throughout?
Yeah, it's recording throughout. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to cancel and we will move on.
Is it okay? I
You're doing fine, relax, chill.
Yeah.
You're doing fine.
I was quite nervous about this.
I see that. No need to be nervous. I've promised an interview for a fella, but he will forgive me. I will reschedule it. The question for you, you're in Kyiv right now, and you see lots of young, healthy fellows, Ukrainians, your age, who are not defending their country, and you are. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, I'm not defending it any longer. I'm in medical limbo. They sent me back to my unit, and it didn't last too long before they realised I was no longer fit for purpose. But regarding any lingering or underlying resentment towards people who haven't taken up arms, I don't know, I try and combat those feelings in myself because it would be cheapening, because we're fighting against an enemy who live by a totalitarian modus vivendi, a totalitarian system, a police state with all its terrors and horrors, all the old ancient evils and ills, and we're supposedly fighting for pluralism and internationalism and democratic values and peaceful prosperity. So it might be counterproductive to force people to fight who are not that way inclined. I personally experienced a horrendously violent episode when I was still living in Indonesia. I was a disaster relief worker. I felt like I had a certain degree of social standing. I was very happy and content in my life, recreationally surfing, engaging in charity kickboxing fights. I had my closest friends around me, or so I thought, and then I was held in violent captivity by some gangsters and gratuitously brutalized. And without that experience, maybe I wouldn't have had the necessary the fire within to make that transition from humanitarian work to armed resistance to the Russian menace as a volunteer. Obviously, I would fight if Britain was invaded because I wouldn't feel like I had much choice. But in terms of volunteering for a foreign conflict, maybe my psyche needed to be poisoned by that sadistically violent episode in order for me to be able to make that leap and actually resist in a violent way rather than humanitarian work, as I would per my previous life experiences. I don't think it would be a good thing to force people who don't have it in them. I used to be a toothless peace and love hippie. Peace, love, unity, respect, plur. And I wouldn't have been fit for purpose when I was 22, 23 in that mode, being very fond of psychedelic drugs from all throughout my adult life, from my early 20s, being a heavy user of LSD and mescaline and psilocybin mushrooms and all the 2Cs, all the 2,5s. I loved psychedelia. I was very gentle and soft around the edges. I wouldn't have been fit for purpose, so it probably wouldn't have been moral to force someone with my mentality into. So I try and apply that thinking to now, and when I see Ukrainian youngsters, or even people in their late 20s, early 30s, men who aren't, okay, yeah, maybe cheaply, I do occasionally have these sort of prickly feelings of resentment, like, oh, you're enjoying yourself getting drunk in the centre of Kharkiv while the older boys are dying in the mud and blood, just so that you can enjoy and you're, making loads of loud, braggadocious noise, getting boisterous, drunkenly babbling with your arm around a pretty girl who looks at me with ice-cold contempt in her eyes. So yeah, my hackles raise a little bit, but I try and combat those feelings in myself, because it probably wouldn't be very moral to force people to fight if they were incapable of operating effectively in a violent and dangerous environment. I already had experience of disasters before I joined the Ukrainian Army, so at least I knew that I could operate under extreme pressure.
Let me ask you this question. It's completely hypothetical, but I'm very curious about your opinion. If, God forbid, Russia will attack the West, can West find enough men willing to fight for freedom? Your generations and generation younger. You're not going to send my generations to that.
It might be like a repeat of the Ukrainian,
Yeah,
the current crisis where the old boys are doing all the fighting.
If in hypothetical Russia invaded Estonia, can NATO summon enough young lads who haven't seen the war for nearly 3 generations?
Soft times create soft people.
But
I don't know
know
if they
your
were...
generations, know your generations younger than you, than me. Do you think West is still capable defending the values they stood for once?
I've been criticised for sneering at my fellow Brits for all their so-called problems, as I put it. But equally, a lot of them don't know they're born. And yeah, at some point they might be jolted out of their slumber and their complacency by the monster roar of missiles and mortars and machine guns and all the good stuff. And we're going to have to, it'll be an existential struggle. It'll be a war for cultural survival, much like this war, the Russo-Ukrainian war is an existential struggle for Ukrainian culture.
But I have no doubt in my mind, you have no doubt in your mind, but knowing your generations, your age and younger, are the people will find the strength, are the youngsters find the strength in their hearts? Tell me what you think.
I don't want to be too pessimistic, but all their perceived problems, when you look at what's happening here in the abattoir, the slaughterhouse of the East, and what I've seen in disasters in poverty-stricken societies, I don't know, I don't think that young Brits and young Americans are really built for it. I think Russia might steamroll over us in a matter of weeks. Yeah, unlike Ukraine, at least the NATO alliance would have an advantage in firepower and a superior arsenal. Well, in all but nuclear weapons, Russia has the largest stockpile of doomsday weaponry. They've got the largest supply of thermonuclear warheads.
Let me ask you this question.
I think we're too soft is a short answer. We need to toughen up in a hurry.
We need to toughen up in a hurry.
Yeah. Soft times create soft people, and soft people create hard times. And I don't know if my generation, and certainly Generation Z, the one below me, the iGen, I don't know if enough of them would have the requisite toughness and mental robustness and fortitude to sacrifice and suffer in order to resist a powerful and sadistically brutal enemy. I don't think we would have the toughness.
Ukrainian society is divided right now by a very profoundly important question. Should they continue the fight? Should Ukraine continue the fight, or should they sign their peace agreement of some sorts, hoping it's going to be not as brutal as that can be by losing the territory?
Obviously,
do you have a say-so since you shed your blood on Ukrainian cause? What's your take on that whole thing?
But again, it's not for me to sacrifice other people's lives like they're pawns on a chessboard. It's a slaughterhouse, it's an abattoir in the east. And while I would love nothing more than to see Putin and all his cronies and all his soldiers, every last one of them, crucified on barn doors or hung, drawn and quartered, slit up the middle like a Cornish pasty and then splayed out like medieval whores in the stocks, put on public display. I would love to see Russia cease to exist as a state. I think they're always going to be a menace with their xenophobia and their barbarism and the extreme cruelty that has always existed there. Serfdom was a thing in Russia until, 1831?
1861.
1861.
Yep.
And then everything that followed thereafter was just as brutal.
Certainly.
In between the two world wars, one of the bloodiest civil wars in recorded history, with widespread barbarism and savagery, and the crushing of both Ukrainian republics simultaneously. And then thereafter, the horrors of Stalinism and the Gulag archipelago and the Holodomor, a despicable genocide, a deliberate famine. And just the cruelty that's been ingrained in their culture, part and parcel of their cultural life throughout Russian history, and the violence of their invasions, what they did to the Kazakhs and the Kyrgyz and the Tajiks and the Uzbeks, the brutality of the way that they conquered all those peoples in what's now what we call the Central Asian republics. And when the British and the French were surrendering their colonies after World War II, well, maybe not the French, they had to be booted out of Indochina, but there was a process of decolonization, and particularly the British were granting independence left and right. It was a new dawn and a new day, like the Nina Simone song. Did Russia, in the course of the whole history of the Soviet Union, did Russia ever surrender territory that it had conquered? Did Lenin ever give back any of the Tsar's imperial conquests? Never. Once a Russian... It's almost like the Russian version of jihad or holy war. Russification. Russian supremacy. Russism. Once a Russian boot has set foot on foreign soil, that land, to the Russist mentality, becomes Russia ad aeternum, evermore, forever Russian. And the brutality with which they conquered all those disparate peoples and cultures. The Dagestanis, the Chechens, the Ukrainians, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, the Kyrgyz, the Turkmen. down as far as Afghanistan, because they were obviously intending to march on India and kick the Brits out of India. They wanted to extend the Tsar's possessions in the 19th century all the way down to the Indian Ocean. Russia has been on a quest for global conquest for centuries, if you examine their history. And if you listen to the bold, naked language that their Tsars and Soviet emperors and Putin thereafter, the same naked, bold language of the conqueror has always been employed. They've never hidden what they are and what their expansionist goals are. And while the Western world has been liberalising and the British and the French have been surrendering their colonies for the past 100 or so years, Russia has only ever been seeking to expand, everywhere and always.
Russia has been quite successful disseminating the narrative that they're only fighting for their security. They need the buffer zone. They're afraid of NATO. What's your take on that narrative?
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Kharkiv and the Donbass, much of the last 2.25 years now. And yeah, I've never met people who hate Russia more than my dearest friends and comrades who speak Russian and communicate in Russian as a first language. And this is very telling. Just moving away from all my Georgian brothers and, you know, Belarusian brothers and sisters and people I've fought with, just in Kharkiv, which is a border town, despite being Ukraine's second city, it's Birmingham or Barcelona. It's a border town with Russia. I say Kharkovsky as a joke, but you're Kharkivchanian, you know, it's a Russian-speaking town and oblast. But all my friends who were younger than me, who were under the age of 30, or many of them under the age of 25, I was involved with the artistic community who were doing live theatrical performances. We would have an English-speaking club in the art gallery.
In Kharkiv?
Yeah. Yeah, the one near the circus, Druj or Druj. Yeah, live English-speaking club. We would have poetry gatherings. Even I trotted out some of my English language poems. I wanted to share a Spanish poem, but I lost my nerve. I even forgot one of the pre-antepenultimate verse of one of my English poems. But yeah, poetry gatherings, live music, live theatrical performances, and all of them, who were all Kharkivchanians, Kharkivchenkas, all their poems, all their songs, all their live theatrical performances were all in the Ukrainian language. They have Russian-speaking parents, and they've grown up communicating in Russian with each other. They've grown up communicating in Russian. And now they answer their Russian-speaking parents back in Ukrainian, and everything they write, every element of their artistic expression is all Ukrainian language. I even, 3 New Year's Eves ago, so not this one, not the one before, the one before that, I went back to Kyiv and I spent New Year's Eve 2022 and the first few hours of 2023 with a descendant of the Russian royal family. So Romanovchenka, how would you say that? Romanova, yeah. Like a female descendant. Romanova. So my friend Nika, she's a Romanova, a female descendant of Tsar Nicholas II. Their entire family wasn't machine gunned by the Bolsheviks in Ekaterinburg in 1918. Some of them survived, more distant branches of the family. Some of them survived gulags. Some of them came to Ukraine and managed to survive not just the gulag system, but the Holodomor as well. And she's a descendant of the Ukrainian branch of the Romanovs, the Russian royal family. And she told me, New Year's Eve 2022, she only started speaking Ukrainian after February the 24th, 2022. And it was only then that she realised, even though she'd always known it, she's a member of a Russian royal family. Her whole family spoke Russian. She's a Romanova. And she told me she only realised how beautiful the Ukrainian language was when she started speaking it after the full-scale invasion. And she told me. And I only realised this when my friends, when the poetry and live music club was started, and when we would have these artistic gatherings, and the English language club, but then when they share poems, theirs were always in Ukrainian. I only realised the truth of her words later, like 6-7 months later, like May 2023, I think we started. But New Year's Eve 2022, she told me, it has an Italian cadence, the Ukrainian language. And I realised later, half a year later, and I'm listening to all my friends, Russian-speaking friends, but sharing their Ukrainian poems and whatnot. To my non-Slavic-speaking alien ear, forgive me for this analogy, but I realised, yeah, it does have an Italian cadence. For me, not speaking a Slavic language, beyond commands from babushkas in the kitchen, or later from army commanders, strilat tam, davai, pida idi zaras, davai, kapati, blat. I realised to my alien ear, it sounded like Russians speaking Italian. And then I started to register the Italian cadence and the beauty of the Ukrainian language. And I realised that Nika, a descendant of the Russian royal family, was right. Ukrainian is more beautiful than Russian. It does have an Italian cadence. She just pushed me a little bit too far. She provoked me. She said, you know what? I read the Harry Potter books in Ukrainian, and it's more beautiful in the English. And I said, fuck you. Excuse my language.
That's quite a stretch.
I said, that's way too far.
That's quite a stretch. So I couldn't stop and resist to ask you this question. So you're a guy, good-looking lad. You're in the prime of your life. Have you ever met a good-looking girl here?
No, I've been incredibly unpopular with Ukrainian women.
Are you serious? That's a joke, right?
From Kiev to Kremina, Kharkiv, and everything betwixt and between. Yeah. Well, since the Krovois Lianya, what little I learned in the way of, conversational niceties, clearly that was all stored in the short-term memory part of my brain, wherever memory is physically housed in the neural warehouse. That part was bombarded and blasted. But strangely enough, long-term memory survived. So even after I was wounded, I could communicate with Colombians in Spanish at zero line. I could go to Charlie Company positions and say, hey, ¿qué pasa, compañeros? Or call over the radio, hey, Irpin, este es Fletch en Kiev posición. Estoy caminando a sus posiciones muy pronto, por favor, no fuego. Yo necesito un motosierra agora, por favor. No fuego. Hasta pronto. And then I will go to the Colombian positions. They're expecting me. I've asked to borrow a chainsaw. So somehow I can pull up the name for a chainsaw in Spanish from 15 years earlier when I lived in Spain.
Trying to communicate in English, basically.
No, I'm communicating in Spanish.
In Spanish on the phone.
With the Colombians over the radio.
Got you.
And I'm telling them, don't shoot, this is Fletch. I'm in Kiev position, I'm coming to Irpin. It doesn't matter revealing this because they've all been destroyed now. I'm coming through, don't shoot. No fuego, por favor. I need, necesito una motosierra muy mucho. I very much need a chainsaw. Hasta pronto, I'll see you soon. No fuego, por favor, don't shoot.
I understand Spanish.
Yeah, so I'm somehow pulling that from the bowels of memory from 15 years earlier, but everything that I'd learned over the previous year and a half, I suddenly couldn't remember. I'm trying to speak to people in Sergey or Kharkovsky or Donbassky, and I was freezing. So my short-term memory is gone, but I can still summon conversational Spanish from 15 years ago. It's strange how the mind works.
So you're saying the girls have a hard time with you because you got wounded? That's what you're saying?
No, I was remarkably unpopular before being wounded. Yeah.
I just couldn't believe that.
When I was a drunken volunteer working in the Kharkiv kitchens and food relief and supply deliveries and whatnot, I still met with nothing other than glacial indifference and widespread apathy.
I would not imagine that. So last question for you. What's in store for Liam Fletcher?
Well, my medical limbo is finally at an end. They tried sending me back to my unit in September. Didn't last very long because, for exactly the same reason that my platoon commander pulled me off rotation 2 months after I got wounded. I got put back into the medical system. No more tales of glory and conquest, I'm afraid. I've been in medical limbo recently. Scarily enough, I was told yesterday by the lady that I thought was arranging for my UBD, or veteran warrior status. She informed me, hey, you're technically absent without leave because you've been discharged from the hospital, but you're not in active frontline service and you're no longer in the hospital. So I had to scramble and convince them of my medical status. I'm like, look, the ambassador from the World Health Organization, who's arranging my ongoing treatment, he's in touch with the battalion medics, and I've been communicating with the battalion medics. Obviously, there's a failure of communication somewhere. So I had a scary morning where I was thinking, am I facing mandatory prison time as absent without leave? And then by the end of the night, by the end of a very bizarre day, my company commander is reaching out to reassure me to summon me back to the base after Masha's funeral. And she's worth a mention, Maria Zaitseva, Belarusian sister-in-arms. She was killed near Bakhmut on the Kramatorsk-Chasiv Yar front on her 24th birthday. And it's worth mentioning her because she was an icon of the Belarusian independence or Belarusian freedom movement. She was wounded by Lukashenko's pigs in 2020 when she was still a teenager. She was 19, and then she joined the International Legion. She was in the 2nd Battalion with me as a medic, and she told me she was a marksman, markswoman, marksminx, but I think primarily a medic, and maybe an infantry woman as well, an infanteer. But all I know is she was killed on her 24th birthday on to the west of Bakhmut on the Kramatorsk front, and that's never going to be all right. That's always going to be indigestible, because I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche to say the light that burns twice as bright burns half as long, but she did burn very brightly. She put something real behind her words, and she never knew the freedoms that so many people in the West take for granted. She spent her young life as a dissident against the Lukashenko regime, and then she died here defending Ukraine on her 24th birthday. So the brightest light extinguished in this dark corner of the human experiment. So her funeral is in a couple of days, and then after that I've been summoned back to base, but I've been reassured by my company commander that I'll get written permission to receive the ongoing treatment. It's not going to cost Ukraine anything because it was arranged by the World Health Organization. The British are funding it, but they deal with this particular program. I need written permission because it's outside Ukraine, but they deal with neuro-ocular problems. So they'll be able to treat both the loss of vision from optic nerve damage and vitreous damage, which is why I'm seeing these hallucinations, spiders. But Ukrainian soldiers call them spiders, but I see them more as sort of molecular structures that move everywhere I look, and it's because the vitreous was destroyed in my eyes and I have optic nerve damage, and I'm monocular now. But Yasser, a very, very good man, a very decent person. He's the ambassador from the World Health Organization. So when I go back to base after Masha's funeral, I'm going to receive the Ukrainian Purple Heart, as it's nicknamed, or the wound medal for wounds. Medals are Poronennya, is it?
Poronennya.
Yeah, medals are Poronennya from the defense.
Poronennya, that's a correct pronunciation.
Medals are
Poronennya.
Poronennya. Thank you. From the Minister of Defense, Rustam Omarov. Yeah. I'll receive that.
Long term, the war is going to be over one day. How do you see yourself living your life? Hopefully, you're going to get back to good health. What you going to do, having this experience? Have you thought about it?
It depends on this treatment. If they can fix, I'm resigned to the fact that I'm always going to be monocular now. I knew what I was getting in for. It's a miracle that I survived being well within the kill radius of a 120mm mortar, but also took out two of my comrades and concussed them. They both had contusia, but they were both at least 15 metres either side of me. So they were 30 to 45 metres separate from each other, and they were both concussed by the shockwave blast. So I was well within the kill radius. And the fact that I kept fighting for another 6 weeks or so thereafter, and then, well, yeah, thereafter, I'm resigned to the being monocular henceforth. Hopefully this treatment that I'm about to get written permission to receive, it's not going to cost Ukraine a penny. It's British and World Health Organization funded for soldiers with neuroocular problems. So either they can fix me and I'm not monocular, or they can maybe stop me seeing through my right eye all these spiders or these gigantic molecular structures that I see everywhere. Fingers and toes tightly crossed. And if not, well, I guess I just embark on a rehabilitation program and I heal and then get back to doing some volunteering. And a man needs a purpose.
So what is your purpose after the war?
Well, it depends how this treatment goes, but I'll find purpose again. Maybe I could be a warrior on the battleground of information. Because, as you say, Russia is very troublesome, very bothersome in the information sphere with their information terrorism in the digital world, upon which we now rely for our information. And the idea that they just pump out this daily tsunami of disinformation, the idea that can poison the minds and beliefs of impressionable young people and people old enough to know better, people who actually hold positions of influence, who wield influence in the real life material realm and could make a positive difference, but they get swayed by Russian information terrorism. Perhaps I could become a warrior on the battleground of information.
Well, I want to wish you the best, good health, and I want to thank you, profoundly thank you, for what you have done for people of Ukraine.
Thank you. I would say it was a pleasure. It wasn't entirely pleasurable, but I wouldn't have forgiven myself if I didn't. So, yeah. You have to pursue purpose as well as pleasure. I think the pursuit of nirvana is futile. And yeah, we should try and exercise moral courage in the real life material realm and put something real behind our words.
Beautifully said.